Hello, good evening, everyone. My name is Allie, and I'm a volunteer with 350 Sacramento. Tonight, I am very excited. I think I said that yesterday as well, but love active transportation and complete streets. So very excited to have you all here with us tonight. We're going to have a panel on slow streets and also just a community conversation about what we can all be doing to increase active transportation in Sacramento. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. All right. Awesome. Sorry about that. All right, so before we get started, just wanted to provide a couple of Zoom housekeeping rules. If you are not speaking, we just ask that you mute yourself just so that we don't have any disruptions throughout the presentation. We will have a Q&A opportunity towards the end, but while each of our speakers are talking, it would be great if you could stay muted. Shouldn't have too much issues with lagging, but if you do find that Zoom isn't working well for you, feel free to just turn off your video. That typically helps improve the quality for you as you're going throughout. And then also, we're going to have a variety of different speakers tonight. So if you have any questions throughout the process, feel free to just drop a question in the chat, and I'm going to be moderating that, and we'll share it with our speakers once we get to the Q&A session. So if at any point there's something that you want to ask them, just go ahead and leave us a little message. Next slide, please. Awesome. Well, before we get started, just wanted to kind of share with folks, if you are new to our 10th anniversary celebration, some of the amazing events that we've had so far. Right now, you're at the panel, but coming up later this week, we're also going to have Mary DeMacher come and do a presentation for us about her book, Climate Revolution. So highly recommend that for anyone interested in climate change. If you're a parent, there's a lot of great tips and tricks in there for how you can communicate climate change with your kids, with your family. So highly recommend checking that out. We also are having a panel called The Future of Food later in the month. So we'll have practitioners from food production, food sales, composting, a host of different folks coming to talk to us about the future of food. And then last but not least, we're also going to end our month-long celebration with a Green the Ween contest. So we're encouraging you all to come up with a fun, sustainable Halloween costume, take a picture, share it with us on social media, and then we're going to go ahead and award some winners. So a lot of fun. Next slide, please. All right. Well, for tonight, I'm very happy to announce that we have 4 phenomenal women here in Sacramento who are doing a lot of great work in active transportation, community building, climate change advocacy. And we're going to kick off our presentation with Deb Banks. She's the Executive Director for the Sacramento Area Bicycle Advocates. Next, we have Naila Pope-Harding. She's a community activist and candidate for the Sacramento County Unified School District. So make sure to check out her website. She is currently on the ballot, and yeah, really happy to see her campaign and the support that she's received so far. Following Naila, we're going to have Jeannie Ward-Waller. She's the Vice President for Walk Sacramento, a local pedestrian advocacy group here in our city. And then last but not least, we have Abby Jackson. She's the Vice Chair of the Midtown Neighborhood Association. And Midtown is really a neighborhood that has taken slow streets and run with it. So we're excited to share that example with you all and hope you can take away some lessons and possibly, create a proposal for your own community. Next slide, please. Awesome. Well, some of you might be asking, why does 350 really care about active transportation or slow streets in general? And I think for us, a lot of that conversation really happened with our participation in the Mayor's Commission on Climate Change. Within that document, they talk a lot about transportation and the impact that it has, on, the impact that carbon emissions have on all of us in the city. And so we've really taken that kind of initiative that the mayor and others in the city have put forth and decided to run with it. I think active transportation and expanding access to low carbon modes of transit and shared mobility is really something that we've all been thinking about. And with the COVID-19 and the impacts that folks are facing, they might have limited space in their neighborhoods to get around. We really wanted to kind of discuss those streets and see if this topic was of interest to those in Sacramento. So, we daily are talking about climate change as an organization, and we're always looking for ways to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions, and transportation is a huge way that we can do that. So, really excited to be talking with you all. Next slide, please. All right. So, I've mentioned the word slow streets a couple times, and I figured that, some of you might not even know what a slow street is. So a slow street is a partially or fully closed street that provides more public access for folks to recreate, to walk, to bike, and to access essential businesses. You may have seen examples in other cities across the state or the nation. And if you go over to the next slide, I have a couple of examples for folks of kind of what a slow street looks like. Awesome. Yeah, so over in the top left-hand corner, you'll see an example from Oakland, California, where they've really slowed down a street on a residential street. When they were choosing what streets they were going to slow down, they looked at the city's bike master plan, and these were streets that they had designed to be bike boulevards. So this is kind of what we're talking about when we talk about slow streets. So I want you to remember these images as we're going through the presentation today. Just give you an example of what a slow street could look like, not necessarily what it would look like if it came to Sacramento, but this is an option and wanted to make sure to kind of share that with you all prior to get going. But enough from me. I'm going to kick it over to our first speaker tonight, which is Deb Banks, and she's going to share with you all a little bit about the work that we've done so far and where Saba thinks we should be going.
Thanks, Ali. Hi, everybody. Thanks a lot for giving me the opportunity to be here tonight. Really excited about talking about slow streets. It seems to be my current mantra. I want to start by telling you guys a story. Let's see, it was in April, I believe. I was riding my bicycle down M Street after having been out on a long ride down in the Delta. So I had on spandex and a helmet, everything. And there was a person standing in the middle of M Street stopping to talk to people. She was a reporter, it was KCRA, I believe, and she stopped and talked to me and said, "Hey, what do you think about this petition on slow streets?" And I lied to her and said, "I think it's a great idea. This is a brilliant thing. I had read about some slow streets in Oakland and in some other cities that had already done some implementation. But I point blank lied to her and said, I think it's a great idea. I didn't really know what she was talking about, what petition. But I went home, which was just a few blocks away, and I immediately looked at the change.org petition and got in touch with the person who created that petition, Nick Pappas, who became an instant friend. And that started my whole Slow Streets piece for Saba. This is back in April. And we now fast forward to right here, we are half slow streets in terms of dining with al fresco. So they've closed some streets down in neighborhoods so that restaurants could open and take care of people out in some streets. But we haven't yet closed streets in the ways in which we're going to talk a little bit more about it tonight. So jumping back to April, I got in touch with our colleagues over at Walk Sacramento, Molly and Alicia, and the three of us sat down and said, let's get something going between our organizations. And we immediately worked on a letter that we crafted and had 25 different organizations sign on to that letter, in addition to this petition that by the time we went in front of City Council about this, had over 700, 800 names associated with, yes, we think Sacramento should have slow streets, here's why. This is really early on. And a lot of this had come from the fact that we were all of us, everybody at this stage of the game, remember back when the pandemic was brand new, everybody was in complete lockdown in their houses. There was very little congestion on the streets, and our skies had cleared up, and we could see the Sierras from downtown. If you had a clear view to the Sierras, you could see those mountains, and everybody was pretty amazed at that. At the same time, we were also wondering about the health side of the pandemic and how would people get some needed exercise and some fresh air, which of course Saba is always an advocate for. We want to see more people out on their bicycles and using the streets. So we thought Slow Streets was a great answer and solution to both helping with clean air and also helping people to get some exercise during the COVID, during the pandemic, and also allowing ways for people to get to essential services and needed spaces for themselves in a safe way, social distancing. And at the same time, cities all across the world were shutting down streets: Paris, Milan, New York, Chicago, Seattle. I mean, the list is really long. So we were like, yes, we think this is a useful thing. And we wrote a letter, got some support, went to City Council and pushed back in April, May. And City Council gave us their ear, and they asked us to work with the transportation manager, Jennifer Donlan-Wyant, who I think is our transportation czarina, if you will. And Jennifer was great and said, let's work together on this. Would you please create a survey and send it out to folks so that we could get some input on where some streets could be slowed, and along with the parameters, the same parameters that Ali had just mentioned, which were that the streets could only be 2 lanes, so not a 4-lane large arterial like Stockton Boulevard. They needed to be primarily residential, streets that didn't have bus routes on them or that wouldn't see large, like emergency vehicles, et cetera. And that the streets already were set at 25 miles an hour, so that they were already smaller streets, quieter streets in our neighborhoods. The idea being that people could get out and about and be on those streets without fear of huge vehicles blowing through and causing chaos and collisions and crashes, worst case scenario. So we sent out this survey and followed up with a rousing round of conversations and phone calls with a number of the neighborhood associations around the city. And we crunched the data that they had given us, and we came back to the city and offered up some streets that we thought and community members thought would be good ones to be slowed. The city didn't care. That's not fair. The city took our feedback and they took our data, and they felt at the time that it wasn't thorough enough, which might have been true. We were moving on a really fast timeline at that moment in time. This was a pilot project that we were trying to get implemented really quickly because we didn't know how long the pandemic would last. We never would have thought that here we are 6-7 months later, that we're still, walking around with masks and not being able to get into places as well as we normally, the old normal, whatever that was, because it now seems almost like it was too long ago. Anyway, I think that the city was right in stepping away from our initial round of this, but yet we thought it was still an important thing to keep moving forward on for all the original reasons that we talked about. It's good for the health, it's good for our environment, it's good for community members, and we think it's a very viable, inexpensive way to make some placemaking in our streets, which is something that I think that is a really good thing. And what I mean by placemaking is to use the streets for things other than just vehicles moving from point A to point B, that family members can use them, that cyclists can feel comfortable on them, that walkers can feel comfortable on them, that folks with disabilities can feel comfortable. Everybody can use the streets, where right now, predominantly, they are car-centric, first and foremost. So we kept the pressure on, and we kept writing letters to the city, and we kept pushing, and Saba kept pushing out through its news mails, blasts, et cetera, that it was an important piece. And at the same time, the Mayor's Commission on Climate Change, which had wrapped up its work, but was starting to work on its implementation and bringing those things to the city, also said that they wanted to adopt slow streets as one of the implementation strategies for the Mayor's Commission on Climate Change. And we thought that was a great idea. And so that push, we did another round of pushing and advocating at the city level, and Mayor Steinberg came out, I think this is now a month and a half ago already, and said, yes, we'd like to implement slow streets. Since that time, the program has been said yes to, but funding hasn't been allocated to it. And there is not clear guidance yet from the city about what the program will look like. The Active Transportation Commission has written a letter in support of slow streets, and perhaps Jeannie will talk about that, touch on that later on. And Saba had pushed and said, you know, there are some cities like Los Angeles that has made this much more of a community-led program versus having it be a city top-down program, which is one of the problems, I think, in the first round of this. A lot of communities weren't as interested in having something done to them. And that's fair, absolutely fair. So this second round is the idea that it would be community-led. And so community-based organizations like Saba, nonprofits, churches, can all decide that they want to do some public engagement in their local communities and then slow some streets in their area, put them forth to the city for them to be slowed and closed. That also means that the community would also take care of keeping an eye on those streets, making sure that whatever materials are used to help slow the street, whether it's sawhorses or whatever the closure mechanisms are, that the community has a hand in making sure that the streets are being used for the reasons that we wanted them to be used for. And so right now we're kind of waiting for some guidance on that to make sure that we know exactly which way we're going to go. And I know that Abby's going to talk a little bit more about that, but you know, not every community thinks that slow streets are the best situation for them. And I think that's a good thing. I'm going to hand this over to Naila, and she's going to give us a different perspective on slow streets. I'll stop here. Naila, you're on.
All right, thank you, Deb. So my name is Naila Pope-Hardin. I am a community organizer in South Sacramento, and I want to take an opportunity to paint a picture of the neighborhood that I organize in and the neighborhood that I grew up. So the average income of folks in my neighborhood are a little over $30,000. It is wildly diverse with 9 languages that are spoken in this small area, predominantly people of color, older community. And if you talk to the community right now, our number one concerns are a grocery store because we're in the middle of a food desert, which you guys will be talking about in future weeks. We also need more services for our unhoused population. As folks are being pushed downtown and further in South Sacramento, they're being pushed into our neighborhood, and we want to make sure that they have services and are taken care of. We care about our concerns are things like economic development and having to leave our community for jobs, not having access to jobs in our neighborhood. And also illegal dumping and vacant lots that are everywhere are just a few of the things that are concerns for folks in my neighborhood. So I think when Deb and Saba and Walk Sacramento came and approached me about what do we think the neighborhood is gonna think about slow streets, my reaction was slow streets. There's so many other concerns that we have first. And I think in some of the disadvantaged communities, there becomes some kind of cynicism around things that we have been asking for a really long time to happen in our neighborhoods. And then those things finally happening when some type of other plan or other process comes and legitimizes it. So we in my neighborhood have been working on our Morrison Creek project for 3 years, but it wasn't until, we have been working on a Morrison Creek project. I'll get to that a little bit later. But it's trying to get a walking and biking path in our neighborhood. We've been working on that project for 3 years, and it's not until other groups come in and legitimize that process that we're actually listened to. And so slow streets is another one of those things where we've been talking about illegal dumping. We've been talking about access to bike lanes and walkable paths in our neighborhoods. And now that slow streets is a thing, we're supposed to hop just because resources in the city are coming to and telling us to hop. Oh, sorry, my mom is calling right now. All right. And so I think that's where our concern came from and where a little bit of our reservations came from. For the Morrison Creek project, that's something that the community 3 years ago developed from the ground up. We have a creek that runs through our neighborhood. Right now, it is chained off and blocked off and no one has access to it. And we've been asking for the ability to revamp the creek and turn it into a walkable, bikeable path. There's an elementary school, there's a middle school, there's a community center all along the creek. We want to be able to give those students and families safe access to be able to walk up and down the creek. We want it to be a space where community can go out and have a nice walk or stroll or ride bikes safely. And it's a conversation we've been trying to have for 3 years. We have also fundraised. I mean, you heard the demographics in the neighborhood. We don't have the most resources, but we fundraised money to be able to do community development, and we fundraised, community engagement. We fundraised money to be able to have plans drawn up and work with engineers to give us 2D modeling and hydrological modelings and all of this stuff that we funded our own. And now this new shiny thing comes around and we're supposed to pick what streets in our neighborhood get blocked off when the city still hasn't addressed illegal dumping and where folks in where our in-house neighbors are going to go and all of those other issues. So I think we have to be like really conscious that while these are great opportunities, there's communities that have already been asking for similar stuff and also have different needs. And so when we start to think about our plans and have these conversations, we need to make sure that we're addressing the problems that were already there, but also acknowledging that these communities have not been invested in for a long time. So to come and want to shut down streets, where are we walking to? For what? To what end? And it isn't something that can just be relegated to a survey, but it really needs to be having conversations, deep conversations, long conversations about how our disadvantaged communities, the type of investment and resources our disadvantaged communities need and want. So while I love the idea of slow streets, I also love the idea of making sure that all the other needs are met first. So I am going to pass it to Jeannie to talk more.
Thank you, Naila, and hi everyone out there. I have no idea how many are out there, and it's always very strange to just stare at your face in these things, but I am Jeannie Ward-Waller. As Ali said, I am here representing Walk Sacramento. I'm the vice president sitting on the board. And Deb mentioned I also sit on the City Active Transportation Commission, although I am not here in my commission capacity. I have my Walk Sacramento board member hat on today. And if you're not familiar with Walk Sacramento, I hope you all are, but if you're not, you should be. Walk Sacramento is a local organization. We work a lot closely with SABA and with lots of other neighborhood associations and groups around the city. And our mission is to advance health equity and quality of life in the Sacramento region through community-centered policy and systems change in land use, transportation, and community development. So I really think of Walk Sacramento as, our sort of core has always been making cities and neighborhoods more walkable, but really, that is just a means to an end of improving quality of life and working across, some of these intersectional issues, affordable housing, safe routes to school, access to education, certainly. Vision Zero is something we've been heavily involved in with the city, and equity, certainly taking an equity focused approach. I think Naila's comments about, making sure these solutions are driven by the community and community centered and responsive to needs that the community has always been saying they had, it is really important to Walk Sacramento. So absolutely, Deb kind of laid out the history of the discussion with the city around slow streets really well. So I won't reiterate that. Walk Sacramento was involved in that initial survey, which, you know, I think there was such a big push in the early days of going into shelter in place to, you know, move quickly. We got to respond. We don't know how long the traffic is going to be down. So the survey was, I think, you know, maybe rolled out too quickly. Really should have been, you know, more thoughtful. If we had known, you know, we would still be here months later talking about it, you know, making it more focused on really what does Sacramento want to do? What sorts of solutions do we want to implement here that works for, you know, I think to Nyla's point, works for all of our neighborhoods, and really meets the diverse needs, and prioritizes the neighborhoods that do have the most need, the most underserved. So I think that's, you know, a really important piece of this. But I just want to say, you know, slow streets has sort of gotten this, this one particular kind of solution. You know, we've seen during the pandemic that you know, a lot of cities are shutting down streets. Oakland, Seattle, San Francisco are being really proactive about sort of implementing these temporary closures, and in some cases making them permanent, which is great. But I think Walk Sacramento's goal is that all streets really should be slow streets. You know, we've got huge corridors in our city like Stockton Boulevard and, you know, so many where we just have huge fatality rates, and our Vision Zero plan in the city has identified all these corridors where there are really the highest rates of fatalities and injuries. And we need to be focused on implementing, you know, traffic calming, road diets, the whole range of, you know, creative strategies that the city has available to them, and making sure that all of our streets are really livable, walkable, bikeable streets. And that's how we're going to get to, you know, some of the bold climate goals of the city. And while we're, you know, in this time of, you know, kind of major change and upheaval, and the needs of the residents of our city has changed so much because of the pandemic, you know, particularly in our neighborhoods where people are out of work or are serving in essential jobs. You know, we need to be thinking about what are the solutions, what are the transportation solutions, the community health solutions that are going to work. And I think, you know, this slow streets can definitely be a solution. And I think to Nyla's point, you know, maybe slow streets should also look like implementing a trail project in a community that's been asking for that for a long time. We can make slow streets our own, and there are lots of cost-effective ways to do that. It doesn't have to be a big, expensive, cumbersome effort. Certainly the city has mobilized to do the al fresco, you know, closures for restaurants. So those same you know, elements, the things that they have used to create that space for restaurants could similarly be implemented to create more public space for people to be healthy, active, and interact with their neighbors safely while we're, you know, social distancing and needing to be outside if you're, you know, interacting with people at all. So I think part of what I'd love to engage in conversation with all of my fellow panelists here tonight and the folks out there watching the webcast is, you know, what should this look like for Sacramento? What should we be pushing the city to do? And how do we make sure it really is community driven and focused on the neighborhoods that, you know, really most need healthy, you know, places to be in their community. So I'll stop there. And I think I'm introducing Abby Jackson, who's going to go last.
Thanks, Jeannie.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, let me, Moise, can you share my slides, please? Let's see, got some good slides for everyone. Okay, first of all, I want to thank 350.org for having me, and Allie and Deb and Naila and Jeannie for all your good comments. It's awesome to be on this panel with you. Thank you. See, I'm just trying to minimize things here. Okay, so on this first slide, This is a picture of Philadelphia, but I think it really exhibits kind of what we're dealing with here in Midtown. So yeah, I am the vice chair of the Midtown Neighborhood Association, and we are interested in a slow streets, in implementing slow streets here. So this slide is exhibiting what we're dealing with. You know, we're going outside, but we're a little bit uncomfortable. Like, do we have enough space out here? Will I get COVID-19? Hopefully not, but it's always that looming threat. And so next slide, please. So I'm here to provide an example of the process my neighborhood has taken to chart a course for slow streets. So I want to kick off tonight's conversation by establishing what we're dealing with here in Midtown for some of our guests. So we're a very dense residential area in Sacramento. This is a parcel map that I pulled just to show the degree of how close, you know, our units are together. So there's a lot of Midtowners and we live closely together. We have limited yard space to accommodate all of these people. I don't have a yard. But wow, we certainly have a lot of roads here, which is awesome. You know, unlike Land Park, for example, Midtown is developed in a grid, which is awesome because we have so many options for getting to one destination or another. But at the same time, we also live in close proximity to jobs. I work downtown. And I live on the light rail track, so I have transit. So a lot of us actually don't even have cars or have a need for cars. So that begs the question, yes, we have a lot of routes, which is great, but do they need to be exclusive to cars? Could we just make them, some of them, exclusive to pedestrians and bicyclists? That could be awesome. And not unique to Midtown, we are, of course, living with the threat of contracting COVID-19. And Midtowners, you know, we love city living, but shelter in place is tough for everyone's mental and physical health. We need safe outdoor access, and not having a yard, you know, it's not a new phenomenon for me, but shelter in place has definitely made me yearn for more public space, I think. So, and then one last point I want to make is that under the shelter in place conditions, there has been a national boom in pet adoptions. So strangely, at like peak dog walking times here, the sidewalks have gotten really crowded. So that's what we're dealing with here and why we thought slow streets would be a good solution for us. So next slide, please. Okay, great. So this is a summary. Deb already covered most of this, but the points I want to make here is that, you know, the mayor, he was really great about developing these solutions for the small businesses, creating the alfresco dining program. And in Midtown, we're very proud of having mixed use here. So we have businesses and residents living together, and that's really fun. So we have safe places to eat and access services, but we don't have safe ways to get there still. And so the mayor in August, which Deb talked about, he brought up that he wants the neighborhoods to lead the Slow Streets effort now. So MNA, the Midtown Neighborhood Association, we accepted this challenge and we launched a public engagement effort in the Midtown area that we're really excited about, and that's what I'll get into now. So next slide, please. This is just an overview of our efforts. So we met in February. We elected a newish board in February, and we talked about the issues of COVID-19 and the economic recession, and thought about, okay, what are the ways that we could help our community? You know, we wanted healthy food access. You know, it was becoming hard to access grocery stores, and like delivery at the time for groceries was taking a long time. And then the other concern was we wanted safe access to outdoor spaces. So luckily our partners at the Midtown Association and Midtown Parks, they created this new farmers market called Wednesdays at Win. If you haven't gone, you should go, it's awesome. So that kind of took care of the healthy food issue. And then we focused on, okay, what can we contribute to the Slow Streets effort? So we wanted, we signed on to Deb's letter, Saba and Walk Sacramento, that they sent to the mayor. But in September, you know, we reignited the effort when the mayor said he wanted the neighborhoods to lead the charge. So we since then have been in conversations with partners and experts to figure out how we can support the effort. You know, we received that criteria from the city that Deb talked about and mapped out the eligible streets, and then we developed some engagement materials, and then also just some educational materials to help, educate the residents about this effort. Next slide, please. So Deb talked a lot about this already, so we can move on. So this is the map. I made this map, not the best map, but kind of hard to see. So in it, you'll see the green streets are the eligible streets that meet the city's criteria. And then the pink ones, the pink segments are the places where like the alfresco dining program has taken place. And then these dashed outlines are the neighborhoods. And Midtown neighborhood is the one, it's from 15th Street to 29th, and then J to R. So that's where I live, in that neighborhood. And as you can see, there's only one east to west eligible street in our neighborhood. And that's not really fun, right? Like to just go on a slow street that doesn't connect to anything else. So we realized the only way this will probably be successful is if we create some sort of coalition with the Midtown area neighborhoods to create a network of slow streets. And we're still doing public outreach and trying to get the adjacent neighborhoods on board. But my dream, I think, would be to create like a robust figure-8 loop on the grid that could be at least 5 kilometers in distance and connect us in close proximity to essential businesses and services. So that's what my hope is, and I'll get into more of the engagement later. Next slide, please. So like I've said, we've been doing a lot of engagement to date. We've had conversations with a number of stakeholders to get their input and make them aware of our interest in slow streets. We met with the City of Oakland and heard from SFMTA to hear San Francisco to hear their lessons learned from slow streets and applied those to our process from the get-go. I want to know, you know, CADA, they've been super helpful. They're a group that develops multifamily housing and owns many multifamily properties in the area. And Midtown, as you might know, has a lot of renters. I'm a renter. And it's been a challenge to connect historically with some of the renters as a neighborhood association. So they offered to provide us direct access to their buildings to do that engagement. So that's really awesome. And the Midtown Association is our local business improvement district here, and they're instrumental in connecting us to different stakeholders like places of worship, senior citizens, and of course businesses and services. So we really appreciate their help with this. Next slide, please. And now, okay, so now we're at the point where we're ready to engage residents and feeling like we won't blindside any of our partners with this idea. So we've developed an engagement survey. And the survey is live, it's located on our website, the URL is there. We hope you take it. We want to hear from everyone who visits Midtown because we see Midtown as our neighborhood, but we understand that it also serves for entertainment and a place for arts and culture in Sacramento. So we want to make this proposal that we eventually send to the city the best slow streets demonstration in the nation. You know, we want it to be a showcase for how Sacramento and other neighborhoods in the nation can expand their public space. So I encourage everyone on this to take the survey if you haven't yet and tell your friends. And then we've also developed an FAQ under that Learn column there, and a volunteer form for those who are really interested. And overall, this website serves to house information and can be a resource to people in other neighborhoods looking to jumpstart slow streets. Feel free to use those materials. Next slide, please. So our next steps, M&A, the Midtown Neighborhood Association, we're promoting the survey. It closes on November 15th. And then we'll analyze the survey results and develop a proposal for a slow streets pilot in the Midtown area. We'll present that to the city and then provide support. Hopefully it goes well, you know, and then we'll provide support as feasible to the city and partners to help implement. But, you know, we'll need some support in that. So we need help promoting our survey to community-based organizations and residents. And then the city will need funding for implementation and leadership from the city. You know, the Midtown Neighborhood Association is a volunteer-run organization. You know, I have another full-time job, so we really will need leadership from the city, but I think it's worth the benefits that the city will get in terms of climate and safety and just overall enjoyment of living here. And then we'll also need support from the community. So I talked about a little bit earlier, we met with the city of Oakland to hear about their lessons learned. And one of the things they did is recruit block captains. So people who lived on the slow streets, and these captains would monitor, like if the sign fell down, they'd go pick it up, or if it got stolen, they'd report that to the city. And then they also had this separate like advisory group that helped guide implementation that was made of active transportation stakeholders as well as community representatives. So that's something that we're trying to recruit people who are really interested to be a part of. And so, yeah, I think it's been a big effort, but I think this is like one thing that a neighborhood association has the power to change. And, you know, neighborhood associations, we don't have voting power. So if there's any way we could impact the community, it's like through these grassroots initiatives. And I think this is a really awesome one. And I am really excited about it. And I hope the city receives, and the residents, I hope they're into this idea. And I hope the city receives the pilot well and the proposal well. And yeah, I'm just looking forward to everything. So thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Abby. That was really, really great presentation. And thank you to everyone else on the panel. I really enjoyed what you all presented on. So I think the next part of our panel, we're going to move into a little bit of a Q&A. So if you have any questions, definitely make sure to put those on the YouTube live stream. Let us know what you're thinking. Do you like this idea? Do you have some thoughts that maybe we didn't cover in our presentation? We're going to be on till about 7 p.m. tonight, so we'll try to get to as many questions as we can. So the first question that we received is, can you share the streets that were suggested to City Council for slow streets after the completion of the survey? And Deb, I know you kind of shared stuff with the other panelists, but if you want to go ahead and cover that.
Yes, we can. I actually, I just created a quick doc that we can certainly share and put out there for everybody. It's a really long list of streets. There is also frequency of how many times different community members identified a street that they'd like to see slowed. I'll also say that this list, while it's really long, it's a really big laundry list. Not all of the streets would fit all the criteria. So when you're taking a look at it, if and when you do, make sure that you remember to think about this criteria that we've talked about throughout the night when you're thinking about what streets you might like to see happen in your neighborhood.
Yeah, I think that's some great advice. Definitely, you got to like remember those key things that Deb mentioned. So, we'll, yeah, make sure that, you know, while there is a lot of streets that folks might want to improve, the city has kind of established some key criteria. So the next question that we have is, where can you learn more about the efforts to develop Morrison Creek into a functioning walk and bike path? So Naila, that one's for you. Take it away.
Yeah, so we actually were able to receive a grant to work on planning and more community development, but that happened right in February. So by the time we were able to sign everything over, everything was shutting down. And so we plan on starting back in January, community engagement efforts. Right now, the best way to stay connected is a Facebook page that is stagnant right now, but will be booming in about once the election is over. It will be booming, I promise.
That's awesome. So a lot of your community engagement right now is likely happening virtually due to COVID-19. Is there any kind of strategies or tips you're going to use to kind of get people's attention? I know there's so much going on, so kind of curious what other community engagement you have in mind.
Oh, great question. We're looking at doing virtual tours, so we can get cameras out there so we can show people what we're talking about, we're interested in doing. One idea was to get one of those trucks that have like big signage and drive it slowly through the neighborhood to announce public meetings, have meetings in parks and host like socially distanced, engagement in parks and on the creek. It's a really long creek, so there's room for all of us to fit 6 feet apart. And so we're going to be figuring out ways to be really creative in utilizing the space we have.
That is awesome. I love the idea of kind of like rolling around the neighborhood. Maybe you can get some people on beach cruisers or something as well to kind of spread the word. So that's awesome. Thank you for sharing that with us. All right. Our next question we have is, what is the timeline and how soon do you think we could realistically get slow streets implemented? So I think, I don't know, we could kind of have some interaction between all the panelists on that, but maybe start off with Deb. She's had the most kind of communication with the city.
Well, it's a little bit of a chicken and an egg. Just recently this week, I was asked whether or not there was still a lot of interest in slow streets. And that information was going into a report to be given to City Council. And it's interesting that that was the question to me, because my concern is that I think there is a lot of interest out there for slow streets, but people are waiting for the specific guidance. What exactly does it look like? Is there a form we fill out? Is there a permit you need to get? Is there a memo you need to sign that says we'll take care of this street? What's the handshake between community organizations and the city to actually then slow the street? Does the city have to sign off on the streets that get slowed? Could Midtown or any other neighborhood group challenge the criteria and say we want to slow, a much larger, wider street? We haven't heard any of that stuff yet. So I feel like we're kind of in this waiting game to hear that piece. And I also think that we're also waiting for some funding and to understand exactly where for funding to come through. While the mayor has said yes, then it falls on city manager and crew to find some funding. And I know that there is a number that's being batted around. I know there's been a budget that's been created, but I'm not exactly sure yet in the deep recesses of how things get done at City Hall about what's the end game on. What's the guidance? What is it going to look like? What's the relationship between communities and City Hall, and what are the available dollars in order to implement?
Thank you for sharing. Yeah, we got some inside scoop here from you. But yeah, I agree. I think there's a lot of big questions to ask, and I think there's clearly a need. Even though Sacramento is a great city, for people walking and biking, there's still a lot of work that needs to be done. A lot of communities that don't even have sidewalks that are connected. So I think, Slow Streets has really highlighted for us just how much more work we need to do around active transportation. So thank you for sharing that. All right, our next question, I think.
Allie, yeah,
go for it.
Let's chime in on that.
Keep talking.
Well, I just want to say that the slow street, part of why this is such an attractive option is that it doesn't really need permanent infrastructure to implement. So we're not like out there pouring concrete. We're just putting up some signs and some cones. How long does that take? The hard part is the engagement, but I think the actual implementation might not take that long.
Yeah, that's right. I wanted to chime in just because, Oakland is already on phase 2 of their Slow Streets program because they moved quickly, within the first month or two of the shutdown. They already had closed some streets. And so now they're at like, okay, what else can we do really creatively to make these more fun, to make them more, sort of community owned and driven. They've got like public art out there now and planters. And so I think it's just an example for us of like, we should just make this our own. Sacramento should come up with our own ideas for like what this should look like for, and tell the city. I mean, Deb's point is, we're kind of waiting for guidance from the city about what they need to move this forward. But I think they actually seem to be really waiting for the community to come and say, this is how we'd like to see it implemented. So it's kind of just a question of organizing, if we have enough energy and can organize and come up with some ideas and say, hey, this is how we'd like to see it implemented, that might push the city. I think the most kind of cost effectively we can do it, it's going to help because it'll minimize what funds are needed. But to see what Oakland's done, they've got little community planters, community garden planters out in the street. They've really gotten very creative, and those are not things that are expensive. And I think, Deb was also making the point, let's do this as a pilot. This is a unique time. There's a lot of changes happening in how people are traveling. People need more public space to just be out and be able to exercise right now because they're cooped up at home. So it's a good time to try some things and make it flexible, make it cost effective, and see how it's embraced by the community. We could be very surprised at, once we've implemented a few of these, people really appreciate and recognize how important it is to have slower streets in their neighborhoods. So I just think let's make it our own. We don't have to Oakland spent $40,000 closing 6 streets. Like it doesn't have to, that's an example, but it doesn't have to fit that model. I think we could come up with ideas to do it differently. And we should make it a Sacramento program.
No, I love that. Naila, do you have anything that you want to add into the mix or any thoughts?
No, I just agree 100% that we need to make it our own. And while we do that, it needs to be inclusive.
Yeah. Yeah. The community, I mean, as you were saying, Ali, too, the community engagement part, I think is the challenge right now. It is really hard. I think coming up with forums like this where we can talk to people, and it takes time, it takes work, and the city, there are so many demands right now on the staff. So I think they really need our help and support to be out talking to the community.
Yeah, I 100% agree. I think right now we've got like a little, we've got our squad. We got 5 people. Let's just keep adding to that group and see how many people. See how many people we can get involved in.
Online too.
We're going good. We're doing it. Just each day adding more people to the cause. So really appreciate you all going a little bit deeper on that one. All right, the next question that I have, and I think this one, I'm going to send it over to Abby. How is the survey that the Midtown Neighborhood Association different from what Selva's done?
That's a good question. I think, when we created our survey, we consulted Deb actually to understand what was in their survey. And I don't think it's that much different from the survey. It's just different how it's been distributed in the neighborhood. And I think, so it's just taking more of a hyper-local approach, I think.
Yeah, I felt
sorry,
I'm jumping in. I thought that when I chatted with Abby about this is that the survey is pretty much the same, but it's a much deeper dive. When we did our first survey with Walk, we were covering the whole city. So I sent Abby both the questions and then the responses that we had gotten from Midtown. And the idea was to go much deeper and, try to get a much broader level of feedback from Midtown.
Yeah, definitely. No, I think that's great. I think that's the importance of, our neighborhood associations, is they have those existing relationships already, where it's, not someone from the outside coming in and say, respond to this thing that I created without you, but really it's like folks can have a conversation with friends and family and people that they already know. So I think that's great. And I think one reason why, us at 350, we really wanted to reach out to neighborhood associations, and I know people are super busy, but really just continue to encourage folks to start those conversations, make introductions. If it's not Slow Streets, maybe it's something else in your neighborhood that you want to improve upon. So yeah, really appreciate that. All right, I'm trying to do a little bit of multitasking and look over at some of the questions that we got from folks. Let's see. All right, so I'm seeing a little bit of frustration from some folks, and really just wanting the city to, for our city council members and for our mayor to really take action on stuff that they've, stated as priorities or goals within, the mayor's commission on climate change and other actions. Do you all, as community advocates, have tips for folks how to reach out and kind of get their attention?
I'll jump in as an advocacy organization. I think that doing what Abby is doing by doing the deep dive in your own community and having the discussions is really useful. And then coming to city council or to us, and we'll come with you to city council, get safety in numbers and larger is better, yeah. To then state the cases, I think is really good. Sometimes when I stand in front of city council and I say that I'm Deb Banks, I'm here as executive director of SABA, they know that there are people behind me, but they also almost know what I'm going to say. I'm going to talk about safe streets. I'm going to talk about active transportation. I'm going to talk about fill in the blank around bike share, et cetera, et cetera. But when you come to city council and stand up and say, I'm here from my neighborhood and our neighborhood did this work and here's our collective voice, it has a lot more power than when I come on behalf for you, if that makes sense. So best case scenario is a both and. I mean, I won't stop coming and going to city council, but it's a lot better. City council really leans in and listens to when the community comes forward. I would also say that, and this is a learning for me, is that advocacy takes a lot of time and it is a lot of work. And I thought naively back in April and May, COVID is striking. Let's also strike while the iron is hot. We need to do this now. Well, here we are 6-7 months later, and A, we don't have slow streets, and B, the pandemic is still here. So it's definitely, you've got to take the long haul and the long approach. And that means you need a good team of people, because if it's just you doing all the work, then you'll get burnt out and you'll get tired, and then you'll move on to something else. So definitely working in tandem with community partners and other people that you can share this with is really, I think, useful. I'll stop there. I'm sure there's other good ideas.
I'd love to piggyback off of what Deb said, because I think it's so true, right? That Deb is an advocate, and so she doesn't necessarily listen to, but then we have disadvantaged communities that are having the same problem. And there's a sweet spot of privilege that the city council loves to listen to. It's like the average, middle class community member that has everything has all the resources they need, but would like a little bit more. That's the sweet spot of person that city council loves to listen to. And so it's really important that while you're doing these surveys, while you're talking about complete streets, you're also saying, and we talked to or worked with these other neighborhoods that don't have the same access to city council. So I think it really is this magical sweet spot that I think, and I know a lot of 350 folks that are in that sweet spot, that we need you to be able to not speak for both sides, but be able to have a conversation that's inclusive of everyone. Because we're always in the disadvantaged communities. We're always a city council. They know I'm always going to be talking about equity, but I'm also asking for like the list I gave you before, grocery stores and bus stops and all these other things where they're tired of hearing from me. So same thing Deb said, but just different side of the spectrum.
No, that's.
I love that. And,
Naeem had to make his appearance.
for Walk Sacramento, we work in coalition as much as possible. We're going to be out there with our partners, with the folks, neighborhood associations, folks that know the needs of their community and advocating for that. So, I think totally support what Deb said, also support what Naila said. I think we need to work together. We need to make a big push on the city that, there's an opportunity right now. We should, be thinking about people's health, thinking about how they can have, safer streets in their neighborhoods. But again, community driven. So in South Sac, in Naila's neighborhood, let's advocate for Morrison Creek. Let's have that be part of the solution for that neighborhood. In Abby's neighborhood, let's close some streets. Let's do the slow street strategy. Let's make it, very community driven, community centered. And none of these projects are expensive projects. So we just need the city to hear from us collectively and hear us advocating for, for that, for the solutions that work for each neighborhood. And again, doing it in coalition together, I think will mean more to the city. So it's a thank you, Allie and 350 SAC for bringing us all on together to have this conversation, because it's, really a good opportunity for us to have this conversation.
No, I agree. I'm thinking to myself, like, all right, I got a project. I'm calling all of you. You have a project? Send me a message and we can disconnect. So yeah, I really appreciate that. Abby, is there anything that you wanted to add into the mix?
Just an update. We are writing a letter to the mayor that is just from neighborhood associations in the Midtown area, but we can extend it to others if they want to sign it. And we're hoping to send that out next week, because we've kind of got this like, okay, is a vaccine coming? Will the CARES Act have to be expended by the end of the year? Can we get some of that money still? So we're trying to make our intentions known and get some of that money if we can to help fund this effort. So that's something we're really excited about. We're trying to get our other adjacent neighborhood associations to sign on. Looking forward to that this week.
Yeah. I'm going to jump in. I think that's awesome. I will also tell you that I pushed hard for us to get CARES Act money for this. It seemed like a no-brainer that money supporting relief from COVID could be allocated to this, and I just didn't get anywhere with it, but that doesn't mean that it's not possible. So
got to put the pressure on.
Yeah, exactly.
No, that's awesome. All right, well, I know we've kind of hit our 7 p.m. end time, but I think you all definitely provided a ton of great information for folks tonight. So definitely encourage people to check out Saba's website, Walk Sacramento. I know Naila even has a web page up for her campaign. So there's a lot of great information out there. I think, I just really kind of want to wrap this up as like, should Sacramento have slow streets? I think tonight you heard two different sides of the coin, and I think it really comes down to what works best for your community, your neighborhood. And I'm kind of really excited to see where we all end up going in the next couple of months. Up on this slide, you can see some resources that I thought might be helpful for folks. So the City of Sacramento does have a neighborhood directory if you're unfamiliar with your neighborhood association, or just kind of looking for places to connect. This is a great resource to check out. As stated, throughout the presentation, definitely try and attend the City of Sacramento Active Transportation Commission if you can. I know I like to definitely get those on my calendar, but sometimes there's just a few of us, and I think the more collective pressure and, support that we can show our commissioners that, we really care about making improvements in our neighborhood, the quicker things might happen. Continue to work with nonprofits and others in your community. And I think really just share your interest in this idea. Let city staff know, let council members know, let the mayor know. I think if they don't feel like there's any pressure, they're not going to act on things as quickly. So we want to demand real investment and just, be always looking for opportunities to collaborate with one another. Kind of my little wrap-up spiel for everyone. But I think next, last but not least, really just want to thank our sponsors for our 10th anniversary celebration. This panel tonight would not have been possible without the support of organizations like SMUD, which is a climate rock star for us this month, and then our climate heroes, Chrysalis Cosmetics and the Sacramento Metro Air Quality Management District. They've been huge supporters of our work throughout the last 10 years, and we're really grateful that, they are supporting what we do. Next, we have our climate champions, the Environmental Council of Sacramento, Councilmember Steve Hansen, District 4, Rosanna Herber, SMUD Director for Ward 4, Dave Tomeo, SMUD Director for Ward 6, and Save the American River Association. Next up, we have our Climate Guardians, Borderlands Bakery, California Solar Press Storage Association, Environmental Student Organization at Sac State, the Green Restaurants Alliance of Sacramento, or GRASS, and Resoil, the Magro Architects, Physicians for Social Responsibility, Brandon Rose, SMUD Director, Ward 1, and the Sacramento Dharma Center Climate Sangha. Apologies if I mispronounced that. For our Climate Guardians category, we have the Sacramento Native American Health Center, Solar Rights Alliance, Heidi Sanborn, SMUD Director for Ward 7, Sunrise Movement Sacramento, Therapists for Social Responsibility, and the United Nations Association of the USA, Sacramento Chapter, and the Women's International League for Peace and Freedom. So definitely a ton of amazing sponsors that, are supporting us this month in our 10th anniversary celebration, but also continue to show support for us throughout the year. Well, yes, thank you all again so much for joining us tonight. I know we've kind of provided a lot of next steps or actions, but up on the screen, you can see some additional places to get connected with us if what we talked about today was of interest to you. If you want to get plugged into 350 Sacramento, just go to our website. We have a mailing list where we offer a ton of great opportunities and ways to get plugged in here in the city. And I think, one thing, it's election season, so make sure you go out and cast your ballots. There's a lot of important issues on the ballot this November, so we always just want to take the opportunity to plug that. All right, well, thank you again so much to my amazing panelists. It was an awesome opportunity getting to connect with you all tonight, and I'm sure we will see each other again in the future. All right, have a good night, everyone. Thank you.
Bye, good night.
Thanks, everybody.